Hi, I'm Simone. This is my housing story. I was a full-time worker with a son, single parent, and I'd rented. Always were able to find a home and afford our rent. Probably about 5-6 years ago, things started to become really difficult. Rent started to rise. We were paying in excess of 50% of my income in rent. I then became unwell. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and I was no longer able to work. I was in a lot of pain and not able to walk or hold things. It was very debilitating, so my only income then became a disability pension. During that time, rents continued to rise. It got to the point where we couldn't afford our rent. We'd been in a house for 7 years. That house was sold as property values continued to climb. We then moved into a property where my rent was more than what I was even getting from the pension. I had to have people live with us and do whatever I could do just to get my son through high school. Once he finished high school, I had to give up my home. I couldn't afford the rent. We then put our things in storage, and then my son went to live with relatives in Sydney. Last year in February, devastating floods hit southern Queensland, northern New South Wales, well, the whole country. We lost everything we owned at that point. So I was in a position of having my son living with relatives estranged from me, only through, geography. He wanted to continue living with his mother, because again, even young people, if adults can't find somewhere to live, how do people who've just left school or are studying find somewhere to live? I decided to come to Brisbane, come to the city, because I thought there'd be homes in a city at least. I understood that rural areas there wasn't much there, but I thought that in a city we'd be able to find a home. I spent months going to open houses, looking, prepared to take anything, but someone whose only income is a disability allowance is, well, you just can't get ahead. And on top of that, you're dealing with, at that stage, there were 50 to maybe 100 people at open houses. I put my name down on the social housing register, something I never thought I'd have to do. And it took a year of talking to housing. I worked with community groups, Heart 4000 here in Brisbane, with one of their homeless officers, just trying to find anywhere for my son and I. Last year, just before Christmas, I got a call from Jacaranda Housing, and they told me that they had a brand new 2-bedroom apartment 5 minutes to the city, that was community housing on a social housing rate. And I think it was the best Christmas present I've ever received. I'd spent a year sleeping. I stayed with my mother for a small amount of time, but she lives in a residential village. She can't have people staying with her long term. I slept on the floor of my brother's house. I couch surfed at friends' houses. As I said, I had my son go and stay with family in Sydney. When you've got a disability as well that affects your mobility and you can flare at any time, it was a lot, sleeping on people's couches and people's floors, waiting for somewhere to call my home. So in January, my son and I moved into an apartment just like this. My son enrolled in TAFE. He's doing justice. He completed his Certificate 4 recently. He's now enrolled in the Diploma of Justice, so he feels good about himself. He's got a base from which he can study and, have friends over, and he catches public transport to TAFE. It's, 15 minutes away. Since having my home, full-time home again, I'm feeling better and better. My health's improving. I know I'll be able to look at going back to work part-time. It's changed our life, it's so important for people to have a home and a secure home. To have a home, to this standard was just such a gift. And I think for both of us, it's given us our dignity, our self-respect, our self-esteem back. It's just, I can't say how important an investment in social and community housing is. There are so many people, and after the flood especially, I know people that are living in cars, are living in pods. I know mothers with children that move from friend to friend to friend, trying to keep their children in school and trying to act like there's, nothing wrong, but there's something very wrong, when in a country as rich as ours that people are homeless. I think too, people think it's only the people that they see on the street that are homeless. There are so many hidden homeless, people staying with friends, people living in garages. It's, I just think housing and an investment in housing is the most important thing that has to happen in Australia today.